Back when I was 21, a former neighbor who is a good friend of mine came over to ask if I could house sit and care for the family dog while they were out of town for the weekend. I agreed, considering I had the weekend off from work. Besides, my buddy always having the up-to-date big screen and stereo made it a plus. So that Thursday night, he came over to the house and he gave me the key before he, his wife, and 3 daughters left for their trip. They had let the dog out and of course left him water and food for the night, so I didn't go over there until the next morning. So the next day, I go over in the morning to let the dog out and fill his water bowl. While I'm over there in the house watching TV and waiting for the dog to bark to be let back in, I start to remember about the girls telling me from time to time about them thinking the house was haunted and such. They would speak about sounds like someone walking up and down the stairs or someone walking into their rooms. I never really believed them because after all, at the time they were 10, 14, and 17. I figured it was just big sis trying to scare the younger ones, and their minds were taking it from there. Plus the house is connected to another house, and the staircases ran up the same wall. So I just figured the noises they were hearing was neighbors walking up the steps and throughout the upstairs because that's what I have heard before. So basically with those thoughts out of my head, I went back home, catered to my own dogs, and collected some CDs, movies, and my gaming system to enjoy the brand new big screen and killer stereo across the street. Around 5 p.m., I got settled at my neighbor's, left my dogs outside in the backyard while I was gone to avoid accidents in my home because I knew I'd be gone for a while. So the first night comes and goes without a hitch. Watched a movie, played a game or two, and watched some Sports Center. Before I left the house, I made sure the dog was topped off on water and food and went home. The next day is when things seemed a little off. I go over in the morning and I noticed the dog's water bowl was empty, which would not be an issue if there wasn't water all over the kitchen floor. The bowl was in the spot where I left it next to the food, but the water was all over the kitchen floor. At the time, I figured the dog just might have pawed the bowl, maybe a reaction to not liking his owner's gone and being alone at night. So I let him outside to go to the bathroom, and I cleaned up the floor and put fresh water in the bowl, and refill his food and left to tend to what I needed to do at home. Later that afternoon, I go back over to let the dog out again and hang out. I open the door to find the dog just staring at the couch like someone is sitting in it. At first, he doesn't even acknowledge that I'm there until I walk behind the couch and give the order to go outside. Again, I'm not even thinking about anything really weird. Hell, the dog was weird anyways. As I go to let the dog out, I notice his food is now on the floor. And not just a few pieces, but every bit of his food on the kitchen floor, and the bowl is sitting right next to where it was left. Now I'm getting pretty curious as to what the heck is going on, but I blame the dog again, thinking he is just frustrated with the family being gone, as dogs do have a tendency to get depressed or saddened when their owners are gone for a longer amount of time than they are used to. So I don't think about it and clean up the food, top off his water, and let him back in. That night, at around 11 p.m., I'm playing a video game, and the dog is just laying down on the love seat and chewing on one of his toys. Then all of a sudden, the dog just bolts and runs upstairs and back down again. This repeated like 5 times, and I'm just watching and almost laughing because it just seemed funny. Then he ran back into the living room and stopped right in front of me, and it looks like he is staring right above my head. That's when I got freaked out a bit, because for like what seemed about 20 to 30 seconds, he was as still as a rock. Didn't move a muscle or shake his tail, and was just staring. Then all of a sudden he growls and lunges on and over the couch and takes off upstairs, running and barking like he had a purpose. He did this like 3 more times and again ran into the living room, stopped immediately in front of the love seat and stared again like something was standing right behind it. This time is a little different because I notice his head snap to the right, then back to the left, and then quickly he looks in my direction and again growls and lunges up and over the couch and takes off back upstairs. This time he went upstairs though he stayed there for like what I'd say about 2 minutes, just barking like he has something trapped but can't exactly get to it. Then as quickly as it started, he stopped barking and came back downstairs and laid on the couch next to me like nothing happened. I left the house that morning again, late, locked up and went home. I felt kind of worried leaving the dog alone, but I couldn't bring him home with me because of my dogs. So I go home and go to bed. The next morning I woke up and I was in a hurry to check on the dog. I opened the door and the poor thing was already waiting for someone to let him out of the back door. I let him out and go check his food and water, and everything was normal. There was a little food in the bowl, but he needed more water. At that point, I'm thinking the dog was again just having anxiety issues, and left it at that. Well, while I'm watching TV, the front door opens and my friend and his family are home. They had to cut their little getaway short because the youngest child got sick. Anyways, we talked and they asked how the dog was, and all the normal small chatter. I told them about how the dog knocked over his food and water, and how he acted the night before, and immediately the oldest daughter raised her voice and said, "That wasn't the dog, it was a ghost. And if you don't believe me, go sleep in my room for a night and you'll find out I'm not joking." I look at my friend and he told me, "Go for it and tell me what you think because she won't sleep in there anymore." And when I tried to prove her wrong, I also felt very uneasy in the room by myself. At first, I thought he was joking or just trying to get a rise out of me, but he was dead serious. In short, I accepted the challenge because at the time in my younger life, I was always down for a dare. A little background about the room. It was a storage area and converted into a bedroom. You have to go into the last bedroom on the second floor. Open the closet in that room, in which there is another door inside the closet that leads into the storage room. They had to fashion a room out of it because the house is originally a 3-bedroom, and with their daughters getting older, they all wanted their own room naturally. So they built the bedroom for the oldest daughter. It was done very nicely except there are no windows, but it was very spacious. The oldest slept in that room for about 5 months, before she had enough of whatever was happening and either slept on the floor in her sister's room or slept downstairs on the couch. So that night, I make sure my dogs will be good until the next morning and head back over to my neighbors for dinner and prepare for the dare. Of course, making little jokes, and I notice that none of the girls are taking them very lightly and giving me the common response of, "Just wait, you will see." I'm a little uneasy, but I try not to psych myself out and just get ready to go to bed. I get into the room and the 14-year-old asks me if I want her to leave her door to the closet open, and I just tell her not to worry about it, and I tell them goodnight and close the door behind me. I lay down in the bed and shut the lights off and try to go to sleep. It's pitch black in the room, so I can't even see my hand right in front of me. I stayed up for maybe 30 minutes and heard nothing during the time. So by then I was pretty much calmed down and I fell asleep. Later on, I woke up to some slight tapping noise, but then I remember the water heater is in the room and that's what the sounds were coming from. But I still woke with a feeling of uneasiness. After about 10 minutes, the feeling just started escalating, and that's when I heard the dog barking and running up the stairs. The dog was in the girl's bedroom and barking right at her closet door. I could hear the oldest wake up telling the dog to be quiet, and then she yelled from the room, "Are you awake? You okay in there?" In which I replied simply, "Yeah, I'm awake, but I'm fine. Good night again." Well, as it turns out, I wasn't fine. Not maybe 10 seconds after I responded, I had the most terrifying experience of my life. As I'm laying on the right side of the bed, I thought what I heard was 2 footsteps right next to the bed. Of course, I can't see a dang thing because it's pitch black, so of course I'm feeling seriously vulnerable at this point. Then, with no regard, I feel the left side of the bed sink in. First, like someone is sitting or kneeling down on that side. Then, just a few moments later, that whole side sinks in like someone is now laying in the bed next to me. I didn't make a movement or a sound, but inside I was screaming bloody murder. The side I'm laying on is against the wall. The side that now feels occupied by someone else is towards the door, so not only am I feeling completely freaked out, I feel like I'm trapped and there is little I can do about it. So I slowly reach over and I feel nothing next to me. Then I feel the bed and I confirm that it is sunk in. I made the decision in my mind I was just going to bolt, but just getting started seemed impossible at that point. That is until the dog went nuts again. The bed shifted like it got up and I felt a good tug on the blanket, and I blindly bolted in the direction I knew the door was in. I knocked over the nightstand and ran into the wall next to the door. The girls started screaming when they heard the thud I made and were flipping out because I almost took out both doors trying to get out. I got back into the girls' bedroom and the dog stood at the closet door, seemingly keeping what was there at bay. At that point, I truly believed them and I never went into that room again, and based on my experience, told my friend to never make any of the girls sleep in that storage room either. They never did, and they ended up moving out of that house a year later. We still talk about that incident, of course joking and laughing about it now, about how the walls damn near came down from me forcing my way out. I'll never forget that experience for as long as I shall live. It was my first real-time experiencing something truly paranormal, and it's what got me interested in the subject. Since then, 5 different families have lived in that house. I never really got to know them, so I couldn't tell you if they experienced anything odd going on in the home. The closest thing I can speculate was about 2 years ago, when I was coming home from work and 2 cop cars were outside that house. I stopped and asked the neighbor if they were okay and what was wrong, and she told me that her son ran to her room, crying, saying someone was in his room, so she got up and locked her door and called 911. She said she thought she heard footsteps in the next room and the hall, but wasn't totally sure. The cops checked the home and found nothing and couldn't see any point of forced entry or an unlocked door or window in the home. She moved out about 4 months later. The home was just recently rented by a new couple. They've been there for about 2 months, but for now, everything seems all quiet. So, there I was, chilling at my cousin Charlie's place in San Luis Obispo. He needed someone to keep an eye on his house, and I figured, why not? It was a good excuse to escape the usual routine. Little did I know, things were about to get way more interesting than I bargained for. I spent the evening solo, lost in a Lord of the Rings marathon. Frodo and the gang kept me company until a whopping 2:30 a.m. rolled around. The marathon had to end sometime, right? With the epic tale concluded, I decided to whip up some green tea. But just as I was enjoying my beverage, a distant scream echoed through the night. Now, let me tell you, I knew it was a human scream, but for some bizarre reason, I just didn't want to believe it. You know the kind of scream that sends shivers down your spine. The quirky thing about it was, the houses in that area, they're really spread out. Lots of rooms between the neighbors, but you can still catch a glimpse of their lives if someone gets a little too rowdy. My initial thought was maybe a neighbor had seen a ghost or something. Blame it on the late night horror flicks. But then, out of nowhere, I heard what sounded like a barrage of firecrackers. That's when I thought, this isn't your average movie night. Suddenly, a feeling gnawed at me, like something was off. I decided to channel my inner detective, grabbed the nearest blunt object, and headed upstairs. Now, Charlie's place has this really cool 360-degree second deck, so I figured, why not check it out? I flipped on the outside lights, ready for whatever came my way. As I stood there, listening intently, all I could hear was the wind rustling through the trees. It felt eerie, like the calm before a storm. The suspense was killing me. But little did I know, the real drama was happening just a stone throws away. Later, when I caught up with my cousin Charlie, he told me what happened. Turns out, there was this guy having a massive blowout with his wife. Things got so heated that he ended up shooting her as she sprinted away from their house. Now here's the kicker. Because I was the genius who left the outside lights on, she ran towards the light, towards me. Tragically, she succumbed to her wounds right outside Charlie's house. I'll be honest, that revelation still gives me chills. Who would have thought a casual house-sitting gig would turn into a scene straight out of a crime drama? Life sure knows how to throw some unexpected twists. Back in my college days, I found myself in the middle of nowhere, Idaho, house-sitting a massive hunting estate for my then-girlfriend's dad. Picture this: vast, open landscapes surrounded by nothing but the wilderness, and the nearest town is 22 miles away. I was filling in for the caretaker, embracing the solitude and the responsibility that came with it. One eerie night, I was jolted awake by a series of loud, aggressive knocks at the front door, and the dogs were losing their minds. Now, you might be thinking, who in their right mind would answer that? Not me. I wasn't about to play hero. Instead, I grabbed the closest thing resembling protection, a trusty gun, and quietly holed up upstairs. Ears perked for any sign of trouble. The nearest neighbors were a few miles away, so I chalked it up to someone mistakenly wandering onto the property. As dawn broke, curiosity got the better of me, and I cautiously opened the front door to let the dogs out. To my surprise, a white Chevy Nova sat in the driveway, its single set of tire tracks revealing its ominous visitation. Now, not one to shrug off weird occurrences, I phoned up my girlfriend's dad pronto, told him about the late-night drama, and inquired if he knew anyone cruising around in a white Chevy Nova. The dude drew a blank and, not taking any chances, he dialed the police. Cue the arrival of the men in blue, asking me questions and conducting a thorough property sweep that lasted an hour. The locked car got towed away, and I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking the weirdness was behind me. Days later, my girlfriend's dad called me with an update that sent shivers down my spine. The mystery car's owner had vanished, and he had met a tragic end. 30 miles away, a suicide that took place months after the unsettling incident on the estate. The guy's lifeless body was discovered a couple of days after he went missing. To this day, I can't help but wonder about the what-ifs. What if I had mustered the courage to confront the knocker at the door? Would it have changed anything? Life's full of twists and turns, and sometimes the unanswered questions linger longer than we'd like.